This is the Serial at Midnight podcast, episode 2. Hello and welcome to the Serial at Midnight podcast. My name is Heath Holland, and I am your host. This is the official podcast of CerealAtMidnite.com and the Serial at Midnight YouTube channel. Each week, we delve into some pop culture topic, movies, television, cartoons, comics. This week, I've got scary movies on the brain, specifically the work of John Carpenter. For my YouTube channel, every year I try to do something with a series that I've created called the Icons of Horror. It's a video series where I just spotlight my favorites, basically, but truly iconic personalities or subjects in horror. So there's an episode about the Universal Monsters. There's an episode about slashers. There's one about Hammer horror. But I wanted to do one about John Carpenter because he's one of my favorite directors. Definitely my favorite horror director. John Carpenter's career is so interesting. And it's not just horror. We're also talking about Escape from New York, which kind of feels like a horror movie. We're talking about some of his more comedic work. Memoirs of an Invisible Man, which is definitely more comedic. He's an interesting director that has definitely put a stamp on everything that we love. You see it influenced in the movies of today, even Stranger Things. Without John Carpenter, does it exist? So to do an Icons of Horror podcast about John Carpenter, I wanted to reach out to my fellow film fan, Jeff from Films at Home, to talk about John Carpenter. We both love the man. We both love the movies. So without further ado, let's roll right into it. This is my conversation with Jeff from Films at Home about John Carpenter, the icon of horror. I love John Carpenter. He's probably a top 3 director for me. Maybe sometimes I call him my number 1 just because the diversity of the kinds of movies. I mean, you look at that, there was a streak, is like Halloween all the way through the late, like They Live is maybe the end of the streak for me. But different, like Escape from New York. These are all different kinds of movies, but he's a master at what he did. So I wanted to spotlight John Carpenter, maybe kind of an Icons of Horror, even though he didn't just do horror, but yep. I know you love John Carpenter too, right?
Oh yeah, I think he's top 2 or 3, and like you said, maybe in October when I'm feeling spooky, he's number 1. Yeah. But yeah, he easily. I mean, I have all the posters up. I love The Thing. Halloween's my favorite horror movie of all time, and everything that created. He literally kind of created a genre almost. He, Big Trouble in Little China, Escape from New York, like you name it, Assault on Precinct 13, like he can do those types of things and then make these awesome horror movies as well. So yeah, I mean, he's just like one of the most well-rounded. I mean, he does the music, just everything. He's just a genius. So yeah, I mean, I love him. I would love to meet him someday because I just want to give me 5 minutes with him. I emailed his assistant once, and that was the closest I ever got to him. So I need to see him in person someday.
Did you get anything back? What was were you trying to get an interview or what?
Yeah, this was early on in YouTube. I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna shoot my shot and see what happens. And his assistant actually responded and was like, look, he's John Carpenter. He's not gonna do an interview with you. I mean, who knows now? Maybe, but he's a pretty it feels like he's a pretty quiet guy. Yeah. But the assistant did let me send some stuff, and he signed it for me. So a Funko Pop of Michael Myers, he signed on the head. The Thing poster that's behind me, he signed, and he signed my 35th anniversary Halloween Blu-ray. So nice. He's pretty cool about that. He's definitely good with his fans, which was awesome. Yeah.
You have to imagine that he's probably been asked everything that's ever possible to be asked. Sometimes I think when I interview people, I try to do the interview that they've never had before. But with some of these guys, they've been asked from what's your favorite breakfast to, what kind of music do you like? He's going to be like, well, what are your musical influences? So it's tough with some of these guys, but he has so much. One of the things that I love about John Carpenter is that he comes across as a little bit of a curmudgeon, and whatever he's thinking, he's probably going to say it. And so you look at They Live. So that's the movie of a man who has kind of been burned out on the Hollywood system. He's franchises and like, hey, what just product, man, which is going to lead into an interesting conversation you are going to have later about just like monetizing franchises. But so he's no stranger to franchises. So there's a Halloween has continued to go on. He did 2 Escape movies. You got Escape from New York and Escape from LA. But he just kind of says what he thinks, and if he's got a beef with somebody, he kind of talks about it. But I love that Thing poster behind you, because for me, I think maybe The Thing is the best. I don't know. It's like whatever Carpenter movie you're watching is the one that I'm like, oh no, this is the best. I think Halloween is a perfect movie.
Yeah.
But The Thing is so chilling, and it's got such great practical effects. It's got characters that you really care about, or if you don't care about them, you're at least invested in what's going on. You're invested in the mystery. It may be a perfect movie. And I know you probably agree since you have the poster up on your wall.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Halloween will be my favorite because, like you said, it's perfect. But like, The Thing is right there, and yeah, I mean, in just in terms of like production value and the way it's shot and the effects, like those are head and shoulders above what Halloween did with the budget he was working with on that. So, I mean, yeah, it's almost like this is John Carpenter at his peak with a budget, with a property that he loves too, because he loved the original The Thing. I mean, he put it in Halloween, which is one of the coolest like little Easter eggs that he would go on and make his own version a couple years later. So yeah, I mean, everything about that, when I watched it for the first time, only having seen at that point, I think I'd only seen Halloween and maybe Escape from New York, and people were like, well, you got to watch The Thing. And this is like, I'm in high school. I mean, blown away, like still stands up there with stuff today with, all of the CGI that they have and all the stuff they can do in computers. I would take The Thing any day over all of that. It's just much more engaging. It is more chilling. The practical effects are like still top notch 40 years later.
So I have a teenager, and she's pretty she likes the 80s because of Stranger Things and stuff like that. But she's also like, practical effects are stupid because they never look good. They always look really fake. And I was like, well, you should watch The Thing. And she was like, what's that? I haven't heard of that. And I was like, because we were having a conversation about, I don't even remember. We were having a conversation about digital effects, but I can't remember what the movie was that led into the conversation. And she's like, I can always tell when it's CGI, but I like CGI more than I like practical. I was like, well, maybe you just haven't seen it done well.
Right.
So she's at the age now, she's in high school. So we were like, we can show you an R-rated movie, like parental guidance suggested. We're here. And so we showed her The Thing, and she was really like riveted. And like, there's that scene where the body's on the table. I mean, hopefully this is not a spoiler for anybody. Watch The Thing if you haven't seen it.
It's been 40 years. I think you're clear.
You've had time. Where the head kind of detaches and like walks off the table, that it's an amazing effect. And The Thing won her over for that kind of practical. She was like, oh, I've never seen anything like this before. Because it's gross too. Like, it's just like, everything's wet and like covered in like KY jelly and all kinds of stuff. Carpenter movies have a very specific kind of special effects, and they're just amazing.
Yeah, I think that's why they hold up too, is like this new generation that is so like obsessed with the nostalgia of the 80s is going to find his movies and love them, because I mean, there's so many. Stranger Things is influenced by so many different movies, and E.T. and Spielberg, but also Carpenter and all kinds of stuff in the 80s. But like that recent season, there were a lot of practical effects, especially with the main villain there. And like, I just loved the way that looked. I don't even think people realized they were practical effects, because you just assume they're not. I didn't until I saw some behind the scenes. And so I think there's going to be a newfound appreciation the more you look at bad CGI in a lot of movies, even high profile, high budget movies, and you can go back and really appreciate like what people had to work with in the 70s and 80s, and how creative they got, and how realistic they could make things look based on, not the greatest technology. I mean, these guys, like you said, it's like KY jelly and ketchup and Vaseline, and like, I mean, they were not working with high tech materials here. But that's what The Thing, that scene in The Thing with the dogs, the transformation of it, I mean, incredible. And and there's other movies like that from that time period that do that well, but like The Thing stands above all of them, I think. Not only from practical effects, but just like the performances, the tension throughout the whole thing, the whole sort of, you don't know who the bad guy is at any given time. There's sort of that little bit like Halloween. Like, we're not going to just throw Michael Myers in front of you the whole movie. We're not going to tell you who the thing is or which person it's in or which animal it's in at this time. So there's that like Jaws ambiguity of where is the bad guy, which I always think makes it better. Yeah, it's just it's a masterpiece. It'll be 40 years from now, people will still be watching that and enjoying it. It's not going to go out of date like some other stuff will.
Yeah, well, you brought up Jaws, and I think we should mention too that, a lot of these things were necessity. You don't show your monster because you can't just have, you got to keep it kind of a secret because there's limitations to what you can do and what you can show, and those benefit the end result. I think they really it's the Hitchcock thing. Like, your imagination can come up with so much more than what they can actually show you. And I don't want to be the old man now who's like, get off my lawn, but with a movie where you can do anything you want to do, where you can just like really use CGI to explore the furthest reaches of your mind, I feel like that the sense of mystery, or maybe the sense of wonder, or even the sense of surprise is kind of lost, because not always, but often, because when you can do anything, you often do anything. And with CGI being as affordable it is, not that it's dirt cheap, but I mean, we see, as you say, like, we see the effects of some of these, so it's not as good. So, they're cranking this stuff out. These houses are like all day, every day cranking out effects, and some of it's not great, but I don't know. There's something about practical. There's bad practical effects too, but these John Carpenter movies really have I don't know. You know what? A movie that I've recently, within the last 5 years or so, really come to love is The Fog. John Carpenter's The Fog. I don't know if I thought it was maybe kind of goofy, or I don't know what I thought about it, but about 5 years ago, it really just smacked me in the face. And I was like, wait a minute, this movie is amazing. The way that it unfolds, and then even it's basically like a pirate curse, like pirate treasure curse is kind of the plot of the movie, in this like lighthouse bay town. And he gets so much mileage out of that, and the cinematography is absolutely gorgeous. And then there's not a ton of special effects there, but they do some cool things, and even like the glowing red eyes. Like, I like all of that stuff. What do you think about The Fog?
Yeah, no, I really see. I forget that one is even done by him sometimes. That like slips with it because he has such a good run there.
Yeah.
For some reason, that one slips. But you're right. I watched it recently while the 4K release came out. So I watched that a couple years ago. I mean, I love folk horror. I don't know if that's my number one, but it's up there. Just being from New England, and like all just the, give me a witch story, give me some creepy, Salem witch trials, all just the creepy woods of New England, and the lighthouse and the bay town, and the curse, like all that stuff I eat up. So yeah, I mean, I love that movie. It's not maybe like the most frightening of his movies, but it's just really well put together. It tells a great story, and it does have those moments. You're right, like the eyes, like the little pieces that he does, and he plays with practical effects or some really cool special effects. Those stand out because there isn't so much of it.
What is the most frightening? Is it The Thing, or do you have another more frightening? Because that's tricky. Because
well, the thing with his movies is like there's not a ton of like jump scares. It's just kind of like constant dread in some of these. Like The Thing, you're just on edge the whole time. Halloween, you're just on edge the whole time. And you don't have that over the top gore, which sort of, I think, almost like you'd kind of mentioned earlier, like almost desensitizes people in a way, where when now that Michael Myers can just stomp on somebody's face and cave their head in, versus there's literally no blood in the first Halloween movie. Like, there's no actual violence really on screen. There's no gore. It's all in your head, which does make it scarier. So, I mean, that one's definitely up there. I'd have to.
Have you ever seen Prince of Darkness?
Yeah, Prince of Darkness is pretty creepy too. I don't know. I'm so partial to Halloween because I just love how dark it is, and it's probably not intentional. It's like we didn't have a budget, so everything is just super dark and in the shadows, and that whole vibe, it just screams fall. And horror to me. So, but yeah, I mean, Prince of Darkness is great too. Donald Pleasance, amazing. Anything. I was sold on him after Halloween. Of course, he did like 12 more of them, but he's so good in other stuff that people don't realize because he sort of became pigeonholed into that later in his career. But yeah, Prince of Darkness is a great one. I'm trying to think. He hasn't done much recently. This is why he
No,
needs
he
to
pretty
make
much stopped around
he needs to make
2010.
a comeback. Well, I saw an interview and he said he's like thinking about stuff and like if the right thing happened, he would do it. He just hasn't felt like making a movie, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, Prince of Darkness though is a lot of fun, and I think that's also underrated. Again, people forget about that in this run that he had. It's usually like They Live, The Thing, Halloween, and then some of his action stuff. The Kurt Russell movies.
Yeah, I've got the IMDb page open here. We should. So he does Memoirs of an Invisible Man, which is a very different thing.
Yeah.
But then Body Bags, In the Mouth of Madness, Village of the Damned, Escape from L.A. I want to talk about vampires. John Carpenter's vampires.
Mm-hmm.
I still don't know how I feel about vampires because I like the idea, but it is a John Carpenter movie. But this is like John Carpenter now, or not now, but I guess those around the millennium. Ghosts of Mars, those have a very distinct, it's almost like industrial techno feel or something, and it's so different from the John Carpenter that I love and that I know. It's not the Halloween John Carpenter. And
Right.
James Woods in Vampires must say the word padre like 36 times during the movie. He's like, I don't know about that padre. It's like play the drinking game where you take a shot every time he says padre.
Yeah.
But I don't know, it's still good. I'm over it as we're recording this. I'm like, I should revisit Vampires because I got it around here somewhere.
Yeah, that's one I haven't seen in a long time, but it was sort of at the end of his, well, I guess the end of his run period. I mean, he hasn't made a movie since what, 2005?
2010 was The Ward, I believe. Let me double check. Yeah, The
I
Ward
knew
was
The
2010.
Ward was the last one. That was 2010. I thought it was earlier, but yeah, I mean the 90s, it was a 90s movie for sure. Like it was, I think Carpenter, and I think like the 80s and the synth scores and the, that sort of vibe, that Stranger Things vibe that everybody loves now. And I don't know. I mean, I don't think they're bad movies that he made, but like I think he maybe had a hard time adapting to like the way that the movies were changing, the way that styles were changing, the way things were being shot. Like I think it was just like out of his wheelhouse a little bit, and he was trying to keep up, but I mean, yeah, some of them are pretty goofy. Early 90s, not so bad, but as he got later on, he starts to lose me a little bit. They're not necessarily bad movies, but they're just not what I think of. They wouldn't crack like even a top 10 list for him.
Well, this is the thing that Tarantino talks about, where every director only has a certain amount of good movies in him before. And I don't want to think that that's true, but it kind of seems true.
Yeah.
And I don't know, we could probably argue both ways, but with a director like Carpenter, who's so rooted in the specific thing that he helped create, and even the non-horror stuff, like we should talk about Assault on Precinct 13, because that's an amazing film it's essentially a Western, but it doesn't feel like a Western. It's just got the motifs, themes, and it unfolds like it's like on the page, it's a Western. And he's channeling there's so many directions I want to go here. So these guys grew up with the movies of the 50s, and then they're making their own movies in the 70s. And it's their influences filtered through them, and they create this thing. But then when time continues to move on, it changes, that like we were talking about, the 90s movies do feel different. Well, the later 90s movies especially feel very different from that core period that we're talking about here. Christine, we haven't mentioned Christine. We should. Like if he does make another movie, and I hope he does, I think these guys like Joe Dante is another one that I really want to see working, but like Dante says, he just can't get financing to make the movies that he wants to make because they don't. I mean, if Scorsese can't get funding for some of his stuff, what hope is there for some of these horror guys? But there's something like being influenced by you have your influences, and you've got this window where you're channeling those into something else. I think that's very interesting. And that might be it, is you've got 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. I don't know. there does seem to be something to the statement that you can, you've said what you had to say, and then there's really nothing else to do. Like Carpenter, like, well, I don't really want to make any more movies. And I know he had as we like from They Live, but he got really frustrated with the system.
Yeah.
And the system that he was frustrated with is even worse now than it was, 12 years ago. I don't know where I want to go with that thought, but do you have anything you want to add anything to that?
Oh no, I do think you're right though. I mean, I think he got burnt out, and everything became so commercial that it just wasn't for him. And I've even seen like recent interviews where they'll ask him about like the new Halloween movies, and he'll sort of be like, I mean, he just isn't. He did the music for them, like he worked with them, but like it just really feels like he doesn't care. Like they asked him like, well, how'd you come up with the music? Did you do the music first, or did you watch the movie? He was like, I mean, like you say, he's kind of a curmudgeon. He was like, well, I just made the music that fits with the movie. And like that was his whole answer. And it's like, okay, he's just kind of not thrilled. He kind of just likes to do his own thing, and it just doesn't seem. They asked him if he was coming back, and he was like, I don't think, maybe if the exact right thing presented itself, which it probably won't, because it's not, but it's hard to have a run that long from late 70s, killed the 80s, even early 90s was still, that's where the decline began, but still making really fun movies. I mean, I like Body Bags. I like In the Mouth of Madness. I think it's set in New Hampshire. So another one that's like more New England kind of folk horror. And I think they just kind of pushed him out. But it's funny because now people are definitely, the tides have turned, where it's like he was influenced by the 50s, made movies in the 70s and 80s. And now the people who are making movies were influenced by the 70s and 80s and John Carpenter. So now you're seeing his stuff come back. So it's almost like eventually, if you last long enough in Hollywood, you can make it full circle and then have like a late career resurgence where they, like, I guess, Scorsese kind of was doing this with bringing back his mob movies recently, and doing The Irishman, where it's like, I'm going to have this little resurgence where I go back to the thing that made me popular because it's become popular again and people are asking me for it, where I've had to focus on other things to be successful in the past. So I think like now's the time for like a John Carpenter, a Joe Dante to come back in, because that nostalgia is huge. It's not just Stranger Things, but it's like there's other even stuff like House on Haunted Hill and like stuff Mike Flanagan's doing. Like that's not typical horror that had been coming out over the last decade. He's changed that game. So like now's the time for them to come back. I think they'd have success. And even, the teenagers who go to the movies, we've talked about this before, that's who's buying tickets.
Yeah,
I think they'd buy tickets to this stuff because it is sort of right in that wheelhouse. Kids are obsessed with that decade right now. The 80s and 90s are just like the biggest pop culture thing right now. So I'd love to see them come back, but it is hard. I mean, it's, unless you're making a comic book movie or some other big franchise like Halloween, where are you getting the financing for an independent original horror or even action or body horror or folk horror? Like you've got A24 and like who else? Like they might give you some distribution, but that's about it.
Yeah, maybe Blumhouse, the Halloween thing. That's
right.
But yeah, it's risky. I mean, that's what it comes down to, is it's risky, and it's too risky for a lot of people because I don't know. You separate. I don't even know. We don't know. We just don't know because nobody's really doing it. I mean, we do get the A24 movies, but nobody's making like a Carpenter-esque, really just going all on. These were new ideas. Now, like The Thing was it's his version of The Thing from Another World, which is an amazing movie, by the way. If people haven't seen that movie, I would highly recommend. What makes me sad sometimes, and I fight this, so I don't see a lot of this with my channel, but I do see sometimes people are like, 50s, ew.
Yeah.
That's the movies that made the people that we love. That's what that's their bread and butter. And all these shock theater, these horror movies from Universal, and everything that was coming on, Saturday night at midnight or whatever. That's what made these guys. And The Thing from Another World is a lot of fun, but you present that, to a studio now. It's going to be Disney, Warner Brothers, or Universal, I guess is who it's going to be. You really got like 3 options. And they're going to go, this is, I don't know about this. Like, what's the budget for this? What's the return on this going to be? And without that big name attached to it, I just don't know it's such a strange world for movies now where everything is so focus grouped and researched. Like, what's the algorithm tell us about? Now, I say that I should also mention, I'm going back and doing a lot of Universal horror movies this Halloween season. And some of what you find out is like these guys in the 30s knew, okay, well, if we've got Boris Karloff, and if we've got, like Lou Landers directing, and if we've got this theme, we're going to do this much box office. Like, they had it down to a formula. And Karloff would go like, can we change the plot? We've done this plot 5 times. They'd be like, no, this is what's safe. So it's not new. It's always kind of been like this, but 70s and the 80s and into the 90s, there was this brief window where, I guess over a decade's not brief, but there was this brief time when you could make these crazy movies with super ambitious special effects, with synth scores, and we revere these things now, but I don't know that they could get done today. You did mention music, and we should talk about, like, he does tours now. Like, I think that's what he wants to do. He just kind of wants to be a rock star now.
That's what it sounds like in his interviews. He really enjoys the music, especially he's doing it with his son. And there's one other guy there's a trio of them that did now I'm gonna have to look this up. There's a trio that did all the new Halloween movies and have been creating music. But I know it's him and his son Cody, and then there's one other guy, and they're like, he's loving just like the touring musician life, because I think honestly, he's obviously a great director and he loves movies, but I feel like sometimes he almost made movies to make music for them, because the music is what's so iconic, and like he created these awesome movies around them, but you sort of remember the themes and the theme music first. When somebody says Halloween, if you play those couple notes on a keyboard, it's like, that's Halloween. I think that's even more recognizable to most people than if you put a Michael Myers mask or Laurie Strode in front of them. They would be like, oh, well, I know that music. That's from some horror movie I can't remember, but I know the music. And so I do think he's sort of musician at heart, and kind of fell into making movies, and obviously didn't just fall into it, did an incredible job, but made them so that he could score them in a lot of ways. And I think that's even why the new Halloween movies, like, he wasn't getting involved as a producer. He didn't want to write them. He didn't want to direct them. But he was like, let me do the music for sure. And he did these awesome new wave kind of Halloween themes, which I think they were great. I mean, they were the best, some of the best parts of those movies. Yeah. So I think you're right. That's what I've been hearing from him in interviews, and that's what I've been seeing. And God, I'd love to see it in person.
Me too.
I'm trying to. I'm keeping an eye on when he comes around, because just 2 hours of that stuff would be incredible.
With the footage behind him on a big screen, that's amazing.
Yeah, it would just be. I mean, there's very few composers, musicians who do things for movies that you could even name. There's John Williams, there's John Carpenter, there's what's the guy from 9 Inch Nails now who does a lot of stuff. Like, there's not many. I mean, there's just not many. Hans Zimmer. Like, he's in that tier of just like all-time greats. So a concert like that that's like bucket list stuff for me.
Yeah, me too. I've got some of his music on he put out an album. There's like an anthology album. There was a new who put this out? It was it was Rustblade Records, basically like an Italian record label, put out this album of like remixes of John Carpenter stuff. Cool. And it's on vinyl and all kinds of stuff. Is the composer the other composer you're thinking about, Daniel A. Davies, or it may be pronounced Davis? He's the third composer for the Halloween Ends soundtrack.
I think that's right.
What was I gonna say? Oh no, I lost my point. It was about music. Like, he's making like scores, and even the stuff from the new Halloween movies, like, the scores aren't really a thing anymore. Like the Marvel movies have a score, and but like actual themes are kind of rare these days. Now we're mostly just in the land of tones and like bass drops and stuff like that,
or literally just remixes of contemporary. Like everybody does that with their trailers now. They take a popular song and they slow it down, and like that becomes the theme.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just not. He's still doing original composing music, which is rare these days.
Yeah, we get the one piano note, soundtrack, or we get like a ukulele version of something.
Yeah, that's pretty right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, even like one of the more famous ones recently was like Jordan Peele's for the movie Us. We just played I've Got Five on it and just slowed it down and made it creepy. Like that became the theme for the movie, but it's like, okay, somebody just kind of played it at half speed. Like was there, I guess somebody had to do it and put it all together, but like it is just a contemporary song, whereas for each of the new Halloween movies, he created a completely original score for the whole movie, which is incredible. And it's the best part of the movie.
And what this tells me is that we're kind of ripe for whatever this is. Like it seems like everybody's ready for it, for whatever something new could be, like a new getting back to, I think we're seeing comic book movie fatigue. I think we're seeing franchise fatigue. Where are the new, exciting, risky movies like John Carpenter used to make?
I think, we're even getting fatigue from that like elevated horror that A24 does, which I love it. They're beautifully shot movies, and there's some great ones. There's some that kind of stink, but it's like maybe James Wan's trying to do it because Malignant was surely out there and totally different. And it looks like this new movie, I don't know if you've seen the trailer, I think it's called Megan, where there's the girl's like an android and teams up with this other girl and then goes on sort of it looks like a killer rampage, but she's also like just dancing the whole time and like being like that Malignant vibe where it's like totally out of left field, but also like this terrifying creature is just killing like that. It feels like it is almost coming back, and the elevated horror is almost too much for people. It's like, all right, 2 hours of dramatic shots and the slow music, and it's nice to look at once, but we want some kind of like hard-hitting, fast-moving, give me an hour and a half of chaos, which is what you used to get. So that's Gremlins. That's the thing. That's it's ripe for somebody to come in here and just take over, just dominate the genre for a little bit. Whether it's action movies, I think we're ripe for those too. When's the last time we had a Tango and Cash or a Con Air or something that was just straight up just hard-hitting action for an hour and a half that was just goofy with catchphrases and explosions, and like, where is that? It doesn't exist anymore.
And you come out with a smile on your face and you want to talk about it.
Right. Like you enjoy it. Yes. Is it going to win an Oscar? No. Nicolas Cage is not going to win an Oscar for Con Air, but like, give me that movie is fun over and over and over again. Assault on Precinct 13 is fun over and over again. Big Trouble in Little China is still one of my favorite movies ever. It's so much fun. Like, yeah, they're just gone. I think the world needs them. We've had enough sort of bleak, dreary, even the superhero movies. And I like the DC stuff, but it's like, my God, can somebody turn the lights on and we can just smile for a little bit, because this stuff is always so dark.
Yeah, for real. It feels like life and death, and we're so angry, but our movies should be an escape from that anger. It should give us, it should be an escape, and we need that. This is a good place to wind it down. You got any recommendations for people that might be hearing this conversation? And I don't want to put you on the spot, but like
it's okay, do it.
I think They Live needs to be revisited because it's a fun horror movie. It's kind of what we're talking about, but it's also very satirical while also being pretty transparent about a man who's just kind of done. It was a 4-year break after They Live before John Carpenter's next theatrical movie. I did a commentary with it for Cereal at Midnight, the YouTube channel, and did it with Josh Jeb Kuga, the writer. He's a comic book writer. He also works for AEW now, the wrestling company. And we really talked about, you go through that movie and like, it is fun, but it's also more relevant than ever before because we are so consumer based now. It's just like, buy. It had our number decades ago, and it just becomes more and more relevant. So I think if people haven't seen that one, check it out. And I also I'm going through the IMDb page here. I also think that maybe it's worth checking out. Like John Carpenter's Vampires is one that I'm not hearing many people talk about these days. It's a later John Carpenter, and I'm curious what people think about that one. What do you got any?
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say that you took the words out of my mouth on They Live, which like it literally is like more relevant now than it even was when that came out. And that was, I mean, it was extremely relevant then, but like the consumerism and it, and I'm a marketing guy, so like I get this, like the digital the ads that follow you everywhere you go on your phone and your TV and your computer. It's like you can't get away from the stuff sometimes. So definitely would check that out again, revisit that. In the Mouth of Madness is one I really do like, and it's developed sort of a cult following, but I think it could go further. I think people need to watch that again because it was ahead of its time. And I think it does tie in. If you like that A24, that folk horror that's sort of become popular, that's a good one to go back to and have some fun with. I mean, it's got Sam. Oh my God, why am I blanking on his name? Sam Neill, who is awesome in it. And yeah, I mean, it wasn't like the biggest critical success, but that one, I'll always plug Big Trouble in Little China because it always surprises me how many people haven't seen that. And like it is, and I think maybe it's just people my age and it's 30 years old now. And like, but don't miss that because I slept on it for way too long. And then one that I guess I always plug this one if people say they like Carpenter. It's not a Carpenter movie, but I would check out The Void, which was a horror movie that came out a few years ago, because that is, I think that's the closest thing I've seen to a truly John Carpenter 80s The Thing type movie since The Thing, at least recently. Like that one was a lot of fun and definitely was a throwback. So if you guys haven't seen that and you enjoy Carpenter, that's one to check out.
Do you think we're talking about 80s horror? And it just occurred to me, I know you're younger than me. Are you 30? You're around 30.
I'm gonna be 30 in 3 weeks.
I'm just gonna blast it all over the internet. We're gonna give your home address out, and we're gonna put out your date of birth and your
And
driver's
here's my
license.
social.
Yeah. Um, but no, so you have a different perspective on this than I do. So I consider myself an 80s kid, and all this stuff, Stranger Things, is made by 80s kids. Do you think that there's a 90s kid horror thing coming where it's going to be in the Mouth of Madness that's influencing things, or do you think it's kind of specific to the 80s?
No, I think that will come back, because if I think about the movies, see, I missed the 80s. I'm born 92, so it's, I know I have basically the whole 90s there, and the early 2000s. I think of Scream, I think of I Know What You Did Last Summer, that type of movie, urban legend, like Final Destination, even there towards the end, the Saw movies. And then it started getting into sort of this, that as I got older, it started hitting that real like gore, torture porn type stuff. But in the 90s and early 2000s, there was this really, it was all the, and it's not just horror movies. It was like, yeah, you inserted horror into this movie, but like you could have taken it out and just had like Can't Hardly Wait or like American Pie. And like if you just inserted a killer into those, it's like, oh, that would have been Scream. Because it's like they're all so, those characters are all so similar. Yeah. And I do think that sort of as people my age, I think a lot of people don't get started making movies until they're into their 30s or their 40s. It's a hard thing to break into. But I think even like with the Scream reboot and some of the other stuff that's come out recently, there's the Addams Family show that's coming. Even movies like X and Pearl, which they're throwbacks, but they're also sort of got that same, like, we got this cast of characters who are in this sort of unique situation. I don't know, it feels like it's coming back. And I think in the next, as we go through this decade into the 2020s, I think you'll see that resurgence where even Stranger Things is like sort of sliding into that. They're kind of getting into the 90s out of the 80s. You're starting to see those influences. So yeah, I mean, I'm hopeful for it. We'll see. Like, I'd like to see a fresh take on them. And I don't know how you do that, but I think it's inevitable. It's like separate 30 years And that's when you start to see. So in the 2010s, you're going to see the 80s come back in a big way. In the 2020s, you'll see the 90s come back. Just like in the 80s, we saw the 50s come back. Like it's just sort of that's the cycle, I think. Yeah. Even back to the 30s with Universal horror, and then you got those 50s and 60s movies, which were definitely influenced by it. So I fully expect it. There's somebody sitting out there. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'll come up with the next great one. But somebody out there my age has got these things, and they're like, man, I really want to make like a Scream or I Know What You Did Last Summer type of movie. And I'm sure they're working on it, and they'll hit. I think they'll hit eventually because people like me will go nuts for them.
I love that too. Urban Legend I love Urban Legend, and I feel like
it's so fun.
People don't talk about it enough, but it's
it's a ton of fun. There's so many like that in that time period that just got I don't know, they just got forgotten. And there's a lot of like 90s like coming of age stuff, like Can't Hardly Wait definitely doesn't get as much love as it should.
I love that movie.
Everyone thinks American Pie, but like that one, I think it's better.
It is better. It's definitely better. Yeah.
But like American Pie is the cultural phenomenon, but that movie Can't Hardly Wait was a ton of fun. So yeah, I think that type of thing, even that type of comedy too, like Austin Powers, like that's what I grew up on. It was Austin Powers. It was real goofy. Dana Carvey, Mike Myers. Like I could see that coming back. Like not every comedy has to be so serious either. Every comedy has some underlying theme, or like, can we just create like a goofy character and just have some great character actor go and kill that role? Because those are fun to watch. Like you said, they need to put a smile on my face. There's too many movies that I leave feeling disturbed or more depressed than when I walked in, or just like, damn it, that hits too close to home. Like
that's the thing.
I'd like some
comedy now is mean, and it's like that's my joke is like comedy now is like, look at this a-hole. It's like really aggressive and like judgy, and it's not silly. And when I see when people do make things that are silly, people are like, this is too silly, and I'm like, but that's what we need. Like, don't you understand? We need silly comedies.
We do now more than ever.
Well, I think we solved all the world's problems with this conversation.
I need to start listening. Send this straight up. I will email the UN this podcast.
Okay.
And that will everything will be fixed.
I was thinking of heads of studios, but you're going even higher. It's just straight to the UN. That's a good idea.
I'm going, I'll send one to the deep state too, so we can really get things done.
All right, man, that's great. Tell people, like, I think I'm sure everybody knows where you're at, but tell people what's going on with you. Plug your channel, plug the podcast, plug everything.
Yeah, so you can find me everywhere. Films at Home. It's on, primary channels, YouTube, but I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. I'm on TikTok. I'm, everywhere that the world expects me to be, I think. And YouTube's the big one. I just recently moved, so the YouTube channel had a bit of like a month-long break while I did all this work behind me. If you're watching on video, this whole room took me about a month to set up, but I'm back now. So I've got 4K reviews over there, videos on physical media, going to be doing some more home video history, like video essays, which I have a lot of fun doing, and bringing back the podcast in the next couple of weeks, sometime probably first week in November. We'll have the podcast back for like season 2. I've already recorded the first episode. I've got a couple of guests lined up for the first couple episodes, and we'll see, who I can get after that. Full transparency, I'm kind of just doing this by the seat of my pants here, but I find people and interview them, 1 week ahead of when you guys listen to them. But yeah, it's all coming back. So we're going to really ramp it up this fall and into the winter, and lots of good content.
Anybody who says that they're not flying by the seat of their pants is lying. That's what we're all doing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm doing what I can with the free time I have. And I mean, you've got a kid, I've got a kid. It's like, that free time is precious. Very precious.
Show your kid The Thing, like I showed my kid The Thing, and
he just turned 1. So I mean, it would be visually interesting for him.
Yeah,
I'm sure he'd enjoy the colors and things. He's funny. He's a little bit desensitized, I think, because he comes down in the basement, and I've got Michael Myers and Freddy busts up on, and he kind of looks at him and points at him and laughs, and I'm like, oh no. I'm like, here's future Jeffrey Dahmer who's laughing at Michael Myers. But we'll just we'll teach him right from wrong and tell him, these are fantasy. We just enjoy these. We don't act on them.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny. I can't wait to show that stuff to him. He'll watch Jaws before he's like 6 or 7. That's only PG, so I can get away with it.
I think that's about when we did it for my family. I think it was about 6 or 7 when we showed it.
That's when I saw it. Yep.
And it made a big impression too.
It did, but like I wasn't scared, which was good.
Yeah.
I saw it on the Cape and went to the beach after I watched it. Like we were in the water. So
you're like,
yeah, I mean, it didn't affect me, but it did create this, definitely created a love for movies. It was that and King Kong. Those were the 2 VHS tapes my grandfather had down at the 1933 King Kong and Jaws. I watched those nonstop. So
that's wonderful. One of the things I forgot about when I showed Jaws to my daughter was that scene where Quint gets killed, and it's just like, this is so gory. I was like, oh, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, just eaten in half when the head pops out of the boat. That's a good one too.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, there's a couple moments that are, I mean, even the poor kid getting eaten on the raft. I mean, that is a brutal thing to watch as a kid. But hey,
thanks a lot, Spielberg.
No. Yeah, hey, that's the reality. He goes in the water in the Cape now. The sharks are there. They weren't there when I was a kid. So it's even scarier now than it was back then.
Well, there you have it. That is the Icons of Horror John Carpenter conversation with Jeff from Films at Home. What are your favorite John Carpenter movies? What do you think about this conversation? Where would you recommend people jumping in? I think it's hard to top Halloween, especially this time of the year. But the man has done so much with his movies, with his music, with the aesthetic that influences everything from Stranger Things to new theatrical movies, new directors that are coming into the scene every day. He is truly a giant. He is an icon of horror, which is why I wanted to talk about him. Join the conversation. If you're watching this on YouTube, please leave a comment. Please thumbs up this video. Please subscribe. If you're listening via podcast, rate, review, and subscribe. Those are the best things that you can do for a podcaster, is to rate, review, and subscribe. Each of those individually is great, but together they're unstoppable. By your powers combined, I am Captain Podcaster. That was a Captain Planet reference. I told you guys there'd be cartoon references. We talk about cartoons here. So really though, by supporting your telling, I want you to tell people about this podcast. I want you to spread the word. We're brand new. And there are 1,107 billion podcasts each day. It's not even weekly, it's each day. The podcast playing field is just absolutely packed. So anything you can do to support this show would be much appreciated. Head over to CerealAtMidnite.com so you never miss a post, you never miss a review. That's really the best place to find Serial at Midnight content, because it's a hub for the videos, it's a hub for the reviews. I'm currently, for October, I've been writing a review series about the 30s and 40s Universal horror movie catalog. Not necessarily the monster movies, because those always get a lot of attention every Halloween season, but Scream Factory has been releasing, I think they're finished now, but there was a 6-volume set of Universal horror movies that don't have monsters in the movies, like The Invisible Ray, like The Black Cat, The Raven, Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff, Lionel Atwill, guys like that. And it's not just Universal movies. It's also things that Universal owns as well. So Universal owns a big chunk of the early Paramount catalog. Here's a fun fact and a sidebar, if you will. In the early days of TV, in the late 50s, Universal purchased about 700, it's actually a little over 700 Paramount movies for their TV packages. We talk about the monster kids of the late 50s and the 60s. They came into these movies via shock theater packages. They were often Universal movies, but they would come on, late at night. There was usually a horror host. I'm thinking, Svengoolie is a great example of what we're talking about, but there's Zachary, there's Vampire, there's so many different, Elvira as well, in later days. But these are the movies that created a lot of monster fans, and I wanted review representation for them up at CerealAtMidnite.com. So that's what I'm doing in October. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, I'm having such a good time, and October is going fast, so I'll probably continue it beyond that. But if you're not hitting up CerealAtMidnite.com every single day, Jack, you're missing stuff, and I don't want you to miss anything. So you can email the show, CerealMidnite@gmail.com. That's right. There's no, whoever got that email address, the CerealAtMidnite email address at Gmail, they're getting a lot of my mail. But I didn't, by the time I got there, it's CerealMidnite@gmail.com. So please spread the word. And again, thumbs up, subscribe, comment, rate, whatever platform you're watching this on. Engagement is the, well, I was going to say engagement is the word. Grease is the word, but engagement is the best thing that you can do. So that's going to wrap it up for this episode, the second voyage of the good ship Cereal at Midnight. Stay tuned. We've got more exciting conversations to come in the future. Until next time, I will catch you later.